This is your economics video on advantages of trade. In the last act of learning, you had to shift the trade production and find point C on both your US and Japan graphs. And what we noticed was that if we just shift the production slightly, we have Japan specialize in making computers, and we have the US shift to specialize in making a lot more wheat, then both of those countries are going to produce extra wheat and computers that they can then trade. And in this case, when the two countries traded, both countries ended up with both more wheat and more computers than they could have produced on their own, making this trade beneficial for both countries. So we're going to talk about various advantages when it comes to trade. And the first type of advantage we're going to talk about is absolute advantage. This is the ability to produce a good using fewer inputs than another producer. Inputs are things that go into making a product. In our wheat and computers example, we did those problems based on the input of labor hours. But you can also do it based on acreage of land or production or machinery. So if two countries or two companies have the exact same amount of inputs, but one can produce more goods and services with those inputs, then they would have an absolute advantage. Otherwise, it's who can make the product using the least amount of inputs. So in our wheat and computers example from Japan and the US, which country had an absolute advantage in producing wheat? Hopefully you said the United States. It took the United States 10 labor hours in order to make wheat. It took Japan 25. So we used less inputs than they did. So which country had an absolute advantage in computers? Hopefully you did not say Japan, because in our example, the United States also had an absolute advantage in computers. It took the US 100 labor hours to make one computer, and it took Japan 125. In our example, the United States had an absolute advantage, or was absolutely better and more efficient than our trade partner at making both wheat and computers. But it was still advantageous for us to trade with Japan, because trade is not based on absolute advantage. Trade is based on comparative advantage, which is the ability to produce a good at a lower marginal opportunity cost than another producer. Remember, opportunity cost is what you're giving up. So you want to be able to produce a good by giving up the least amount of the other good. So if you think back to our wheat and computers example, which country has the comparative advantage in wheat? Hopefully you said the United States. When the United States decided to make one computer, how much wheat did they have to give up? Hopefully you said 10. Because on the United States graph, your wheat to computers ratio is a 1-to-10 ratio. 1 computer to 10 wheat. And because it's a straight line, we know that's a constant opportunity cost or slope. Japan's 240 to 1200 is a 1-to-5 ratio. So we have a comparative advantage in making wheat, because every time we make a wheat, we only give up 1/10 of a computer. They would have to give up 1/5 of a computer. 1/10 is a smaller number, so we have a lower opportunity cost. And which country has a comparative advantage in making computers? This one would be Japan, because every time Japan makes a computer, they are only giving up their ratio between wheat and computers is a 1-to-5 ratio, whereas ours is 1-to-10. So they would have to give up 5 tons of wheat for every computer they make. If the US had to make the computers, we'd be giving up 10 tons of wheat. That's twice as much as them. So it was more advantageous for them to make the computers, because comparatively, or comparing their ratios of good A and good B, their comparison ratio was better than the United States's. You can also look at comparative advantage by making a chart. So for the United States, 1 computer equaled 10 tons of wheat, and that means 1 wheat equals 1/10 of a computer. This is always the reciprocal. That also means that in Japan, 1 computer equals 5 tons of wheat, and therefore 1 wheat equals 1/5 of a computer. So you have a comparative advantage in the first good, let's say one computer, if your second number is lowest. So the US would have to give up 10 tons of wheat, but Japan only gives up 5. They have a comparative advantage in making computers because the thing they're losing, the opportunity cost, is lower. The comparative advantage in wheat is going to go to the United States because they would have to give up 1/10 of a computer, where Japan would have to give up 1/5, which is a larger number. So in real life, countries often specialize in goods that they have a comparative advantage in compared to other countries. So this also means that if we all can specialize in things that we're really good at, things that can use our natural resources of our country and things that the labor force in our particular country is very good at making, then we can make extra goods and trade them for things that we're less advantaged in making. And because this international trade happens all over the world, this is how we get more production with the same amount of resources. This is how we make the economic pie larger. You cannot make your own clothes and your own food and be your own doctor and make your own cabinets and fix your own car. You are going to specialize in something that you do really well and then use your salary from that to buy the other things you're less good at. The same thing is happening from country to country. And because we're all specializing in certain goods, the whole economic pie is getting larger because we can purchase things that we need that can be made by other countries faster or more efficiently than we do. And then we can all have more goods and services available to purchase. For your next act of learning, I'm giving you another example. This time we're looking at Argentina and Brazil. They both have the exact same amount of inputs, 10,000 hours of labor per month. You've got various data there for Argentina and Brazil producing coffee and wine. And I want you to figure out how to answer the two questions at the bottom.